Welcome to our third installment in our learning of the Kavanos of Purim. Now that we've set up our two important introductions, introducing the language and how the light of the truth gets translated and transformed into different vessels, different kailim, different languages, and setting up how this itself is a very major theme, maybe the theme of the Kabbalistic way of thinking about everything, and discussing how this means that there's two ways of going about this kind of limud, this kind of teaching, this kind of learning. Either we're understanding the idea, understanding the light itself, understanding the truth, and looking for ways, searching for ways to articulate it, and then we can say thank you for being given these ways, these many ways of articulating it, both in the words of Torah, both in the words of Kabbalah, and the words of Chassidus, and the words of different Mefarshim, which have searched and found different words, different language for the things that we feel and the things that we know. And both in the inward way, where we say we have all these tools, let's try to actually use them. Let's try to actually use them as a way in the hidden levels, the inner levels, to deeper understanding and to better living also. And as well, we also set up last time our intention, known as in Hebrew as Kavanos, which is setting our steering wheel on the right path, saying with all of this, both our actions and our thoughts, we mean to get somewhere good. We mean to open ourselves to the light of God in the correct way. And now that we have all of this set up, we could start to get into the actual subject which we came here for, which is understanding the ideas of the Kavanos, of the intentions, of the thoughts, and of the mitzvahs, and of the story of Purim. So the first thing we're going to be discussing here, and I'm going to show you some quotes of it, and I will post under this video or wherever you find it a link to some source sheets where I'll at least underline or show you exactly the sources that I'm teaching and basing on. The first idea is to understand the relationship between the story or the history of the story of Purim with the things that we do, both on a simple level and from this itself we could get to a deeper level in both of them. In other words, we all know the simple pshat, which is actually what the Megillah says, that there's kind of two things. There's a holiday, there's mitzvahs, there's things that we do, things that we talk, speak, do with our mouth, with our ears, with our minds. Mitzvahs manis, mitzvahs ashes hazman grima, which are all the mitzvahs of me'adim. And now these mitzvahs have kind of reasons. They have tam mea mitzvahs, and in some way they're different than the relationship of many other mitzvahs to their reason. Because, for example, we might say the reason for not eating Giddanusha, that's a Farshe Pusik. The reason that we don't eat the Giddanusha is because there's a story with Yaakov Avinu, which fought with a Malach in Parshas Vayishlach, and however we understand that whole story, lezecha that we don't eat the Alkan le'ech le'bnai Yisrael as Giddanusha. There's this mitzvah, there's this thing that Jews do. We don't eat the Giddanusha. The reason is Kituka kef yerech Yaakov ve'av ki'imai. The Malach touched his Giddanusha, and therefore lezecha that we don't eat the Giddanusha. Okay, but everyone understands that the connection between the reason and the action is a kind of a distant connection, at least in the reality and the way we do the action. Because we don't, every time we kshech the animal and take out the Giddanusha, or make nikkur, or take out the Giddanusha, we don't every time say a psapusik, alken and nimichan ziman, alken li'ech libnei Yisrael. We don't start to give a hagudish al Pesach, we don't start to tell the story of Yaakov Avinu and the Malach. Maybe we should, we could maybe discuss that mitzvah separately, I'm not sure. Anytime I make these kind of comparisons, we have to go back and check if it's actually true that we don't do it over there. But in general, nobody does. Masha Einkein, different than that. Mitzvahs, all mitzvahs have me'adim. It's almost like a rule. If we want to make a rule, which mitzvahs we care about their reasons, and which mitzvahs we don't really care about. So every mitzvah that's a time, that's done at a specific time, every single one of them, we talk about their reason, and even a mitzvah, or even a part of the mitzvah to talk about the reason. Like we could talk about the mitzvah of Shabbos, which is the first mitzvah given in time, the first mitzvah belonging to a specific time. And we have a mitzvah of Kiddush, which Chazal understood, K'zocher Sema Shabbos, the Kaddishoi. It should be Mekadesh as a Shabbos. How we Mekadesh as a Shabbos? By mentioning on Alakos, with a glass of wine, we mention the story of creation, the story of Sheshes Sima Musa Hashem Hashemayim Vesuretz. L'Shem Zeh, Al Kain, Vayunach B'yem Hashvi, that's why we have Shabbos. And similarly, in all the other Yom Tovim, both there's a general rule which says we learn mitzvahs kol chag v'chag b'zmana, hilchis chag b'chag, hilchis atzeres b'atzeres, hilchis paisach b'paisach. And there's also mamish a mitzvah, like on Paisach we have a mitzvah of telling the story of a Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim. And other Yom Tovim we do similar things with Kriyas HaTorah. And we could get into differences, maybe Chanukah doesn't have such a mitzvah, which we could talk about on Chanukah, why there isn't such a mitzvah. And at least on Purim there is a mitzvah of Mikra Megillah, which is analogous to the mitzvah of Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim, which says, in this day that we have this, we're doing because of that reason, we don't only do it and make a mishta v'simcha. Then if you ask someone, Talmud Chacham, that knows the reason, they'll tell you, yeah, it's because there was some story with Taman and Esther. But we tell the story every year, and there's a mitzvah of Mikra Megillah, and we read the story every year. So what do we learn from all of this? What do I see from all of this? That there's different relations between the reason, or even sometimes the historical reason, can have very many different kind of relations to the grandchild or the child of that historical reason, which is the mitzvah and the thing that we do. There could be a relation which is, we could say, it's not nikr, it's not mizgala, it's not openly clear, it's not mifurash in the action that it has anything to do with. Like the Gid Anusha doesn't actually tell you the story of Yaakov Avinu and the Gid Anusha. And then there's mitzvahs like the mitzvah of Pesach, the mitzvah of Purim, the mitzvah of Shabbos, which actually their action has in itself a prat, a halacha that says, remember what happened. And in other words, we could even see these mitzvahs as being l'chatchila only a way to remember. In other words, like everyone knows, when we talk about Tamiyah mitzvahs, maybe even the mitzvahs which have the reason, we don't always know that that's the full reason. In other words, let me say it in a better way. In other words, the action that we do could conceal the reason that it has. Everything in the world has actions and has thoughts. There might be a law, which is like an action, a real thing, a masadig thing, and there's an idea, a more abstract thing, a more rachnisdig thing, a more spiritual thing. And many of the things that we do, although they all come out of thoughts, they all derive out of thoughts, they don't actually reveal their thoughts, they conceal their thoughts. So the mitzvah of Kiddush and the mitzvah of, generally we could say the mitzvahs that we do in the weekdays, even though tefillin and tzitzis have mefurish reasons, and we do say some of it according to some poskim, it's not as mefurish as other mitzvahs. So those mitzvahs, we could talk about them as concealing their reason. And there's good reasons for concealing the reason. Like Chazal say, if we tell you too many reasons, you might make mistakes and think that you could do the reason without the mitzvah, and you're not understand exactly how it works. Or other reasons why they have to conceal their reason. What we call Yom Tovim, what we call all the Yom Tovim, are actually mitzvahs that reveal their reason. And not only they reveal their reason, sometimes we said you must reveal the reason, like Rabbi Gamliel said on Pesach, Kol Shlema Shleish Dvarim Eile, Lo Yitzei Yedei Chavusah. If you don't discuss the reason for eating matzah, you didn't really eat matzah, because eating matzah is not just a mitzvah to eat this kind of bread, it's a mitzvah to use the eating of this kind of bread in order to tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's how Rabbi Gamliel understood. And similarly, if the Chachamim are saying, if you're going to do Mishlach Munas and Mishta V'Simcha, not going to read the reason for that, you're not going to be actually doing the Mishta V'Simcha. In other words, we could be like a Lamdan and say, it's not going to be a Purim Dig Mishta V'Simcha. You could have a big party, but it's not going to be a Purim party. How do you make it into a Purim party? By reading the Megillah before. And by reading the Megillah, you say that this is the reason. In other words, you're making the action that you do reveal the reason. So just from this discussion, we could see that generally, generally days that we call mi'adim, what we call holy days, one of the senses in which they're holy, one of the senses in which these days are special, more interesting, more better than other days, is in their revelatory power to reveal the reason for themselves. In other words, if you're on a Wache Tag, if you're in the weekdays, then you're not in the feeling of the things. You're doing things, that's how weekdays are. We're doing things, we go to work. Sheshes Yom Tavad, even in mitzvahs, there's Sheshes Yom Tavad. Sheshes Yom Tavad, we do what we have to do, we put on tefillin and we go to work and we're living in a world of doing. Yom HaShvi, it comes Shabbos, it comes Yom Tiv, that we don't work. So what do we do when we don't work? We think. Shabbos is a day of thinking, a day of rest, means a day of thinking for human beings. We're thinking because we don't have to be stuck with doing things. And now even when we do a mitzvah, when we do a avodah, then we're not just doing it, we're also thinking it. We're also being connected to the taste of it, to the tam, to the inner essence of these things. That's first level in all of this. And this is actually why, when it comes to Yemei Me'adim, days of Me'adim, there's like a hete, there's like not only a hete, maybe a chiyuv or a mitzvah, to be osik in tam mitzvahs, to be osik in the Kavanos of the mitzvahs, because really we should be doing Kavanos of waking up in the morning and saying Moeda'ani. But we should, and we will. But when it comes to a day like Purim or a different Yom Tovim, the actual mehis, one of the actual mehis of being a Yom Tov is that it opens up a world of the mind, that it opens up an understanding of things, not only a doing of things. Now we have to take this 1 or 2 or 10, at least one step further. So the first step we said, but there's something called Kedushas Hayom. And Arizal, if you medayek and Kisva Arizal, everywhere, there's besides for the mitzvah Hayom, besides for the stories of the day, for the Torah that we read on the day, there's always something, a concept, which also in Purim we discussed it, it's called Kedushas Hayom. In other words, this day itself, besides for the fact that there's a mitzvah on Purim to read the Megillah, and on Pesach to eat matzah, and on Sukkot to sit in the Sukkah, that's all things that we do on that day. But there's also, and actually before that, there's something called Kedushas Hayom, which in other words, this day is a better day, is a more holy day than a weekday, than a regular day. Even before doing anything. And in translation to reality, it just means that you wake up in a better mood that day, or if you're waking up in a higher mood that day. So that's a word we use. Before you're doing anything, when you go to daven and you're going to go learn, then we're going to maybe do something with that, and we could actually get higher than the day gave us for free. But for free, just opening a day, that's a certain Kiddush. And that Kiddush, in our terms over here, is it being a time in which we're open, to hear reasons for things, in which we're open to taste the inner meaning of things, not only doing them. And that's the first step. Now, second step, which is more important and more explicitly what Arizal talks about, is that we also have to understand, and therefore we also have to understand the relation between this time and that time. This is what is known, as we say in Purim and Chanukah, and the simple literal translation is, in those days, meaning historically, in Shnas, whatever it was, the Shnas, Nes Purim, but Zman Hazeh, in this time, namely Yidal Duda, and the 14th day of Duda, at the same time, then in a different Yidal Duda, this story happened, and therefore we have some kind of relationship to it in this time, in the Zman Hazeh. Now this needs to be explained. So there's a simple reading that Arizal says that everyone knows, and it says more or less in the Arizal, in the Kavanos of Purim in some way, maybe some other place I'm trying to remember now. It says in other places in Kisva Arizal, it's actually less explicit than you would expect. The Chassidus Sforim and other Mefarshim talk with him a lot more. One more time it says in Arizal very openly is in the Drishim of Rosh Hashanah. But that's where it says. And the idea that the Arizal is well known, Shem the Arizal, is that when we remember something in history that happened on this day, we're not only doing some kind of action that is, there is the story, there's the actual thing that happened, and there's like a remembrance that relates to that. And the Arizal says, no, what we're really doing is reliving that same thing. Many Mefarshim bring out this the Pusuk of the Megillas Esther, Vayomim ha'ela niskurim v'nasim, means they're remembered and they're also done. So in a certain sense, the story of Purim doesn't just happen in history and now we're remembering it. It actually happened this year again. Now obviously that's false, because someone dead, Nachashver is dead, everyone is dead, all of these stories are happening, there's not really a Hashmid Lahari and all these things. So for this, the Arizal would add another part. He's going to say, well, of course, it doesn't happen in material, physical reality again every year, but it does happen in inner reality. It does happen in other words, just like we understand, if we remember our last year. And everything that we see on this world, everything that happens in this world, really has its source, has its shorish, has its source, its root, in some kind of more mystical reality, in some kind of more absolute and more abstract reality. And everything that actually does happen is just different articulations of that. And therefore we can understand, and this is a very true understanding, if we understood the last year, we could understand that the fact there's a story of Purim, the fact there's a Haman, an actual Haman coming, doing his thing, an actual Achashverosh doing his thing, an actual Esther doing her thing, an actual Mordechai doing his thing. If you could abstract the people and think only about the Shoresh, and you would translate and say Haman is such a sphere or such a klippe, and Esther is such a sphere, and Mordechai is such a sphere, and so on. And how can I understand those spheres? They exist today too. They're actually still doing their thing. Maybe they look differently. Maybe they're not actually being articulated in the same exact way as it was then. But especially when we're doing mitzvahs that are built on these ideas, the people that were Masakim Purim, they based it on the ideas that we're going to relive through our action, through our remembrance, which all actions can be summarized and as our remembering. Through our remembering, well, we were going to relive this action, we're going to recreate that action. So it's true that the way we're doing it looks different than the way it was then, because now we're just doing a fake Haman with a Haman Purim spiel, and a fake Mordechai with some kid dressed up as Mordechai, and etc., etc. But in the meaning of it, in the rachnis of it, it's the same one. And therefore, this Purim is actually the same thing as that Purim. That would be one part of that understanding. Second part of that understanding would be some understanding the more circular, mythical, circular conception of time. In other words, we usually read time, and us in the West at least, we're used to reading time in a linear fashion, meaning time progresses all the time. There's one day, another day, and when after 6 days we get a whole week, and then there's the next week, and then there's the next month, and the next year, and the next decade, and the next century, and the next millennium. And that's how history moves on. We have a conception of time as continually moving on. In other words, we have a conception of time which keeps on being forgetful. It keeps on forgetting what was, in making progress, moving on to something new. And according to many researchers and many Chachamim, the old way of looking at time, the more mythical way of looking at time, was seeing it as a circle and not as a line. And seeing it not as 1 week and then we have another week, but as 1 week and then we have the same week again. And we could think about if it means exactly the same week again. Of course, I understand some things change and some things actually do progress, but that's the more old-fashioned conception of time. And if you read different Mekabulim, I don't know if the Arizal himself, but other Mekabulim, you could see them saying this openly, beferish. For example, there's a famous Arachaim Kodesh on the Pusik, Ki shesh yom usa Hashem usa shemaim v'esoretz. He says, doesn't say Ki bishesh yom usa Hashem usa shemaim v'esoretz. God created 6 days, and those 6 days keep on happening again. And we could make this in little more reasonable terms, and we could say, maybe in some aspect it's new, but there's still the way we cut up time, and we have years and months and weeks and days and all these kinds of things. They have a circularity to them, right? We every year get back to the beginning of the year. It's not the beginning of everything in linear conception of time, but in a circular conception of time, it's actually the beginning. Because if we see it as a circle, then we're going back to the same place. And therefore, the Arizal would understand that in this time called Yudalid Udar, or maybe in generally in Chodesh Udar, we can get into details, how much detail there is in this circular notion of time. I'm not sure, but at least generally, we get back to the same period, and in this period there's maybe some kind of thing called Haman, and Olam Atzilut, something called Haman, which gets disordered every time this time, and every time we need Madcha and Achashverosh and all to break Haman and to win the fight. And we're reenacting, not only reenacting, but reenacting, actually reliving and re-getting the same thing that happens in this year, in the circular time of this year. That's the second understanding that people have in this concept of the Arizal. I'm going to want to problematize this a little bit and take it one or two steps deeper than that, and more exact than that. The first assumption I'm going to make, and this is as I'm trying to explain as Tikla Rashash, which I'll show you. The first assumption I'm going to make is that you can't have this kind of dichotomy between the truth and the revelation of it. I don't buy any theory that says, when spiritually, if you look with Kabbalah glasses, then you'll see that Haman is alive, and some people say when we hit Haman, we're actually hitting the real Haman in some kind of spiritual way. And if we say, we stand up and we say Yesh Yehidei, so we see Matcha Tzadik in our eyes of the mind, in our spiritual sense. Give me 1 second. Now, this is a good way of thinking. In other words, it's definitely true that there is a difference in how things might seem and how things really are, and it's good to practice, not always taking things at face value and trying to see some more stronger meanings of them, some more inner meanings of them. That's not actually a good way of, it's not the truth. Because the truth is, like the Zohar and the Arizal say 1,000 times, Olam Ha'elyon is kedigmas Olam Ha'tachton. Olam Ha'tachton is a shadow of the Olam Ha'elyon. So how could you tell me that Tov Shi and Pai, in Olam Ha'elyon there's Purim, and Olam Ha'tachton there's something that looks different? You're breaking your very basic rule, your entire rule, which is based on the idea that this world needs to be the same as the higher world. It needs to be not only the same, it needs to come out of the higher world. And we can go much deeper than this and say, it's kind of boring and really repetitive to have this simplistic notion of circular time, which basically means, and that Arizal would say, would definitely sign it, this basically means that God did the same thing twice. We had 1 year, Purim 1 year, and then Purim another year, and they're just the same, and that's the world. It's a circle. The world is a circle. Everything comes back to where it was, like Kehillah said in the simplistic reading. Hakol. Everything goes back to where he started, and at the end of the day, we're back at square one. Like what Nietzsche called eternal recurrence. Nothing ever happens, really. That can't be true. Not only can't it be true, but if it would be true, there wouldn't be a reason to do Purim this year. Because we did it last year already. And Arizal has the opposite view. He has a view which says that anything that gets done, that gets finished, that gets shleimus, that gets finished, we never need to touch it again. In other words, if this zikurim would work correctly, it would be enough once. And we have to understand that the Arizal said the same thing about every other mitzvah. Anything that we do is based on there being something missing in what we did yesterday. Because if our prayers would work, let's take a simple example. If our prayers would work, let's say someone has a sick person and he's davening for it, and the person got healthy, he stops davening that he should become healthy again. Nobody comes and says, that sickness only means that you're missing something, and therefore it's this year again. So every time when you got that time of the year that you got sick, you should mispal again that you should get healthy. Nobody says such thing. Everyone understands that that's shtissim. So why would anyone believe it when I tell it to you about Pesach or Purim that every year there's a new Haman and a new Parai? That doesn't make sense. And the Arizal says explicitly that if Adam Rishon, the first day, would have done a right tefillah, if its tefillah would be correct, if he would do it b'shleimus, if it would be a complete and whole, everything that I need to do, we would not have to pray one more time in the history of the universe, or not even have to do one more mitzvah. The reason that we still doing things is because Adam Rishon And we can get into deeper levels of meaning of that, but that's what he said. Because of admonition was not okay. He didn't do everything he needed to do. So we're still finishing up all the things that he could have or should have done in the first day. And therefore, if we understand like this, and the Rizal says it also in another place very openly, that every single tefillah, every single mitzvah that you do has a new kavanah. Even though when we say that we have to redo it because we didn't do it correctly, we're obviously not doing the same exact thing. Because that again would be a waste of time. We're obviously doing a new thing, slightly differently. So the way to understand this so we have to understand this more correctly.